Matt Hart with the Illinois Truckers Association. Thanks for joining us. One of the points you were making concerned the International Fuel Tax Agreement Program that was referred to as IFTA. And what is that, and why would it matter if we don't have a budget by July 1?
Sure. And a lot of people don't know what IFTA is. IFTA is the International Fuel Tax Agreement. Unlike your automobile, where you drive across the country and you purchase fuel in different states, and the state then collects their motor fuel tax in those states, IFTA is a system for truck drivers to make sure that no state has any advantage over another state based on their fuel tax. And so it was to level the playing field state by state by state on fuel taxes. So for example, if you're an Illinois company and you, trucking company, and you spend 50% of your time in Illinois and 50% of your time in Indiana, to make sure that Indiana doesn't have an advantage of purchasing cheaper fuel over across the border, IFTA basically is a way for trucking companies to report the number of miles that they run, and then they pay an apportioned amount of tax based on their number of miles. So that this trucking company based in Illinois with half their time in Indiana, half their time in Illinois, doesn't matter where they buy their fuel, they're going to fill out a report every quarter that says 50% of my miles were in Indiana and 50% were in Illinois, and I'm going to pay 50% of my fuel tax for Indiana and 50% of my fuel tax for Illinois. And that's apportioned state by state by state based on the number of miles that you run. And trucking companies pay that quarterly, file that quarterly, and it's a network that the lower 48 states all participate in, so that you don't have to get a fuel permit when you go from Illinois to Indiana or from Indiana to Ohio, as we did many decades ago. The problem that we are facing today in Illinois under IFTA is that the state of Illinois, which is a member of IFTA, the International Fuel Tax Agreement, has been collecting money for IFTA. And it's money that trucking companies in Wyoming and trucking companies in Ohio and trucking companies in Wisconsin, when they cross through Illinois and they have filled out their quarterly reports and have said, I've run miles in Illinois and I need to pay my Illinois fuel tax. And some of that tax has been collected by the state of Illinois that is due back to the other states and the jurisdictions. Because Illinois hasn't had the legal appropriations authority since July 1, 2015, we haven't made any payments to any of those member states. And so you've got 47 other states with their hand open saying, wait a second, state of Illinois, we've been paying you, but you haven't been returning any of our IFTA money that is due back to our carriers. And right now the Illinois Department of Revenue says that figure's over $9 million is what we owe to other states in the IFTA system. Our concern at the Illinois Trucking Association is that IFTA eventually is going to get tired of not getting their payments, is going to tell Illinois, listen, you haven't paid up, so we're going to kick you out of the International Fuel Tax Agreement. If that occurs, then every truck coming into the state of Illinois would have to purchase a fuel permit. And every Illinois-based carrier that leaves the state to do business would then have to buy a fuel permit in those other jurisdictions if we're no longer part of IFTA. And that's our largest concern, is that would create what we believe would be utter chaos in the trucking industry because so much interstate trucking occurs in and around the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and that's, this is something that we as Americans just take for granted, that we can go from one state to the next, and you don't have to have a passport. To use that as an analogy, if the Illinois truckers had to be getting a fuel certificate or permit in every state, it's almost the equivalent of if we as a citizen had to have a passport every time we left Illinois to go to some other state. It just becomes bureaucratically a nightmare.
Exactly. I mean, imagine the next time you go on a family vacation, you say you drive from Illinois to Florida and you go through Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia and Florida. Imagine having to stop at every single state and get a permit so that you can purchase fuel and pay their fuel tax in each one of those states. And that's what IFTA, the solution that IFTA provided, is that it provided a place to where truckers didn't have to get permits state by state by state. And it's a system that's been operating for decades. But we run the risk of being kicked out of IFTA if we're not living up to our obligation to IFTA. And right now, legally, we don't have the authority to live up to our obligation to IFTA. And that's what concerns us at the Illinois Trucking Association.
Aside from the permitting, does it also mean Illinois wouldn't be getting some of these monies, and these are federal dollars, I guess, are they not? Am I
Well,
saying that wrong?
They're not federal dollars. They're dollars that trucking companies pay for fuel tax that are collected in the other states, and then they all go through. There's the International Fuel Tax Agreement system. It funnels back to the states based on the quarterly reports that trucking companies provide, where that money should go. And even the one other risk we have too is that right now we have several Illinois-based trucking companies that are issued refunds due to them through IFTA. And again, we don't have legal authority to make those payments as well. That's over $4 million that we owe our own Illinois-based trucking companies.
We the state of Illinois.
The state of Illinois. These are quarterly reports that were filled out last September, filled out last December, filled out this spring, where we've said, you know, we the trucking company have traveled these different states and we've overpaid for fuel, and we should be given a refund based on the taxes that we've overpaid. And the state of Illinois owes over $4 million to Illinois-based carriers, in IFTA-based carriers as well.
How many carriers are there in Illinois?
There's roughly about 26,000 trucking companies total in the state of Illinois.
Well, we, for everyone's sake, hope a budget deal is reached, and we appreciate you for joining us.
Great, thank you very much.